I introduced my new girlfriend to my kids last Sunday. I thought I was ready. I thought they were ready. But their faces told me everything. Shock, confusion, maybe even betrayal. No one screamed, no one smiled either. And in that quiet moment, I realized, loving again is easy. But being loved again, with children in the room, is not. It's been years since the divorce. Enough time, I thought, for all of us to heal, or at least adjust. When I met someone new, kind, warm, understanding, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, I caught myself smiling at messages, waiting for calls, imagining what starting over might look like. But in the back of my mind, I always pictured this moment, the day I'd introduce her to my kids. I rehearsed it in my head 100 times, what I'd say, how they might react. Would they be curious? Awkward? Silent? I didn't expect celebration, but I hoped for grace. Because loving again in midlife, it's not just about finding someone. It's about wondering if the people you love most will let you love freely again. And that is the hardest part. The days leading up to the meeting felt heavier than I expected. Not because I doubted her, she was wonderful, but because I didn't know where my kids stood when it came to me, moving on. I've always tried to be present for them, even after the divorce. Weekends together, movie nights, checking their homework, packing their lunches when they stayed with me. But there was always an invisible line, one that said, "This part of my life stays separate," and maybe I drew that line too clearly. Maybe they thought I'd never cross it, but here I was, about to blur it. I told them on Thursday, "Hey, I'd like you to meet someone. She's important to me." There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then my daughter said, "Okay." My son just mumbled, "Sure." I didn't know how to read it. Were they okay? Were they hiding their feelings? Were they just being polite? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the dinner. How would I introduce her? Should I keep it casual? Would she hug them? Should she? I replayed every possible version in my mind. The awkward ones, the hopeful ones, the disastrous ones. The next morning, I called her. "I don't want to pressure them," I said. She paused, then replied softly, "We'll take it slow. I'll follow their lead." That's one of the reasons I care so deeply for her. She understands this isn't just about us. It's about them too. Saturday came. She arrived a little early, bringing a pie she baked herself. She asked, "Too much?" I smiled. "They'll appreciate the effort." We set the table together, simple, homey. Chicken, vegetables, a salad I knew my son liked. Then, the door opened. My daughter walked in first, then my son, dragging his feet a little. "Hey guys," I said, trying to sound calm. "This is..." She stepped forward, extending a hand. "Hi, it's really nice to finally meet you." There was a pause. My daughter looked at her, then looked at me. My son glanced at the pie. Then came a nod, a barely there smile. They sat down. Small talk began, stiff but civil. They asked a few questions. She answered kindly, never pushing, never forcing a connection. And yet, under the surface, I could feel it, a quiet tension. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't warmth either. It was something in between, like standing at the edge of a lake, not sure if the water is warm enough to step in. Still, I was grateful, because they came, because they stayed, because sometimes showing up is the first act of acceptance, even if it doesn't look like it. Dinner moved slowly. Conversations hovered around school, the weather, and a movie they had recently watched. But underneath the words, something unspoken filled the room, A quiet tension that neither laughter nor politeness could soften. She tried. She asked about their favorite subjects, smiled when my son made a dry joke, complimented my daughter's necklace. But every effort was met with caution. My daughter answered, but her words were clipped. My son kept his eyes mostly on his plate. At one point, she excused herself to the kitchen to bring dessert. The moment she left the room, my daughter looked at me. "Is this serious?" she asked. There it was, the question behind every polite smile. I nodded slowly. Yes, I care about her. She stared at me, expression unreadable. "She's nice," she finally said, "but it's weird, seeing you with someone else. Mom and you, well, you were always just us. Now it's different." "I know," I said softly. "I didn't plan for this to happen, but I'm trying to find happiness again. That doesn't mean I love you any less." She didn't say anything, but her eyes glistened. Not with anger, not even sadness. Just something quieter. Loss, maybe. Or the sting of change. Then my son spoke up. "She's not Mom," he said bluntly. "No," I replied. "She's not, and I'm not asking her to be." He pushed his fork around his plate, not looking up. "I just don't want everything to change again. We just got used to how things are." And I got it. I really did. Divorce had shifted their world once, and now this, someone new, threatened to shift it again. To them, it wasn't romance. It was instability. It was unpredictability, wrapped in a kind smile and a homemade pie. She returned with dessert, sensing the silence, but saying nothing. Instead, she quietly placed the plates down and sat back at the table. "I don't want to replace anyone," she said gently, her voice calm but steady. "I know how much your mom means to you. I respect that. I'm just hoping, over time, maybe we can get to know each other. No pressure, just honesty." There was a long pause. Then, my daughter picked up her fork and took a bite of the pie. "This is actually really good," she said, not looking at her directly, but with less edge in her voice. My son didn't say anything, but he didn't push his plate away either. And in that moment, something subtle shifted. Not acceptance, not approval, but maybe a beginning. The kind that doesn't need big words, just small gestures, a shared table, a second slice of pie, and the courage to sit with discomfort, even when love is trying to grow in its shadow. That night, after she left, the house felt strangely quiet, not heavy, just quiet in a way that made me listen more carefully to my own thoughts. I waited a bit, then knocked on my daughter's door. She was scrolling through her phone, earbuds in, but pulled one out when she saw me. "Can we talk?" I asked. She nodded, moving over so I could sit on the edge of her bed. I didn't know where to start, but she did. "She's not bad, Dad," she said. "She's just not what I expected." "What did you expect?" I asked. She shrugged. "I guess I thought, if you ever dated again, it would be way later, or maybe never." There was no malice in her tone, just honesty. A child trying to make sense of something she never imagined would actually happen. "I didn't expect it either," I said. "But she came into my life at a time I didn't know I needed someone. I want you to be okay with it, but I also understand if you're not. I just don't want to hide this part of my life anymore." She nodded, slowly, then leaned her head against my shoulder. "It's weird, Dad, but I want you to be happy. I just hope she doesn't change you." That line stuck with me. Change me. I realized then that what they feared wasn't her, but losing me. The version of me they felt safe with. The father who was just theirs. Later, I found my son in the kitchen. He was putting away the dishes, something he rarely did without being asked. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "I didn't mean to be rude," he said. I just didn't know what to say. I get it, I replied. You don't have to say anything you're not ready for. He looked at me, his voice quieter this time. Is she gonna be around a lot now? I hesitated, then answered, not unless you're comfortable with it. This doesn't mean everything changes overnight. He gave a small shrug. Okay, as long as movie nights stay the same. I smiled. They will. You pick the next one. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something. Over the next few days, the subject came up in small ways. My daughter asked where she was from. My son asked what she did for work. They didn't ask because they were curious. They asked because they were opening a door, just slightly. And I learned not to push it open too fast. That sometimes trust doesn't come in declarations. It comes in questions, in quiet moments, in choosing to stay at the table. That night, I didn't feel like I'd solved everything, but I no longer felt like I was walking alone. The weeks that followed weren't magical. There was no dramatic transformation, no sudden dad we love her moment, just small shifts. And that, I've come to learn, is how real change happens, with quiet footsteps, not grand entrances. One Saturday morning, my daughter asked if she could come with me to the farmer's market. I hesitated. She'll be there, I said gently. I know, she replied. That's why I want to come. She didn't say much during the trip, but she walked beside us, listened, laughed at one of her jokes. And when we got home, she said, she's easy to be around. It wasn't approval, but it was something warmer than tolerance. Later that week, my son came home from school and casually mentioned, tell her thanks for the lunchbox tip. My sandwich didn't get soggy today. I blinked. That might have been the highest form of praise I've ever heard from him. There were still awkward moments, times when they didn't know how to include her. Moments she wasn't sure if she should stay or step away. But we kept trying. That was the key. We didn't give up when it felt unnatural. We didn't fake closeness. We just kept showing up as we were. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Sometimes she left early so I could have time alone with the kids. She never forced herself into spaces they weren't ready to share. And that patience, they noticed. One evening, my daughter sat beside her on the couch during a movie. Not close, but not distant either. At the end, she said, "You cry at the same parts Mom used to cry at." It could have stung, but it didn't. She just smiled and said, "I guess some stories get to all of us." I realized then we weren't erasing anyone. We weren't replacing anything. We were simply expanding. Love doesn't ask us to forget. It asks us to remember differently, to make space for new stories without tearing down the old ones. There's still a long road ahead. I don't expect perfection, but I'm grateful for the small signs. A question here, a shared laugh there, a moment of eye contact that says, I see you, and maybe I'm okay with you being here. And perhaps most importantly, I'm learning to be patient, to hold space for their emotions without making them wrong, to honor their pace, and to trust that love, when given room to breathe, will grow in its own time. If you've ever tried to start over while still holding on to the people you love, you know it's not easy. Love, especially later in life, doesn't come with clean lines or clear paths. It's messy, it's slow, but sometimes it's also the most honest love we'll ever know. Maybe you're a parent trying to date again. Maybe you're a child navigating your parents' second chapter. Or maybe you're just wondering if it's still okay to choose happiness for yourself. Wherever you are, I hope this story reminds you. It's okay to move forward carefully. It's okay to love again, even if your voice trembles when you say it out loud. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me your story, raw, real, unfinished. Let's create a space where second chances feel less alone. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories to tell, and maybe one of them is yours.